So for the seventh day of class, we learn about South Asian cultural traditions, as your book called them. But what we're really talking about is Hinduism and Buddhism. And for those people who didn't know anything about Buddhism, some people did and some people didn't. What Buddhism is, it's the middle way of wisdom and compassion. Like the analogy of the guitar I gave. A guitar where the strings are way too tight, you strum it, they break. If it's too loose, you strum it, it produces a pretty unpleasant sound. When it's right in between, it produces a beautiful sound. Life is like that guitar, the middle way. Now, it's a 2,500-year-old tradition that began in India and spread through the Far East. A lot of people felt Buddhism started in China. That's not true. It began in India. Now, it's a philosophy, it's a religion, it's a spiritual practice, followed by more than 300 million people. And it's based on the teachings of the Buddha. And a lot of people thought that was his name, that Buddha was his name, like my name is Anthony. No, it's a title, which we'll get into right here. So who was the Buddha? Now, the Buddha was born Siddhartha Gautama, and he was born in tremendous luxury, the best clothes, the beautiful palaces, the best food. He was really living the high life as well as could be lived. And he grew discontent with that, believe it or not. And he became aware of the suffering of the world. And at the age of 29, he rejected that life, the good food, the beautiful clothes, the palaces. He gave it all up and he left. And he spent 6 years as an ascetic, depriving himself of everything, to suffer, to intentionally suffer, with this thought that through suffering enlightenment might happen. Now, at the age of 35, he rejected this extreme, sat beneath the Bodhi tree, as we can see in this visual here, sat in meditation and achieved nirvana, or an awakening, the truth about life, becoming a Buddha, meaning the awakened one. It's a title. And a little personal story. When I played football as a kid, they told me, get big for playing offensive line. And I stuffed my face with just overindulged with everything. Wasn't the healthiest practice, but then wrestling season would roll around and my coach would say, you need to lose a ton of weight to wrestle this weight class. And I became, in a sense, an ascetic where I gave up food and suffered very much to do that. So similar to the Buddha, not as enlightened, obviously, I realized that extremes are not good. And on a personal level, I can attest to that. So anyway, a little personal aside. So after the age of 35, he spent the remaining 45 years of his life teaching others how to achieve the peace of mind that he had achieved. So a little bit different than some other religions, he said we all can be the Buddha if we follow certain things. And his teachings hinge upon these four noble truths. Truth number one, if you live, you're going to suffer. Life is hard. You will suffer. Now, the cause of suffering is self-centered desire and attachment. We are attached to things. So the solution to this is to eliminate this desire and attachment. When you detach, you don't suffer because you're not desiring other things. And if you follow the Eightfold Path, you can achieve nirvana. Okay. He also spoke of these three jewels. And I think you can apply this to a lot of things. I think you can apply this to life. The three jewels would be the Buddha, the teacher, the Dharma, the teachings, and the Sangha, the community. Whatever you get into as an adult, if you find somebody who really teaches you something valuable, that's a jewel. When you look at their instructions and you go deeper in learning about whatever that subject is, the teachings, it makes life better. Then if you surround yourself with people, a community that support you and nurture you, you're going to be in a pretty good place. So I think that's a good point to make. So what do Buddhists believe? They believe in rebirth. Reincarnation results from karma. You put forth good energy, you do good deeds, good energy comes back, and vice versa. That nirvana is a peaceful, detached state of mind. I don't know if you've ever experienced a perfect moment. They don't happen very much in life. But these beautiful, peaceful, like all is right in the universe moments, you can achieve that. And when you achieve that, you escape this cycle of rebirth. Okay, so once Gautama Buddha died after 80 years, he achieved nirvana. And he taught many, many people how to lived this way, and then he ceased to exist. He did not claim to be divine like other religions do. Buddhism is non-theistic. Buddha is not God, okay? He's not what the Western religions perceive as God. He was just a teacher. He was just a man. Now, earlier I said the fourth noble truth involved the Eightfold Path. So, how do I follow the Eightfold Path if I am a Buddhist? With wisdom. In regards to wisdom, try to understand people. Try to have the right motives to live. In terms of discipline, use the right words. Engage in the right actions. Do an occupation that betters the world. For mental discipline, give your best effort. Be mindful of yourself. Now, case in point, there are 8 parts here, and the Buddhist iconography is an 8-spoke wheel. So each of these spokes in the wheel represent this eightfold path. Christians have a cross, Muslims have a crescent moon, Jewish people have a Star of David, Hindu people have an Aum. All religions have iconography and symbols. Now, what are some Buddhist texts? The Tripitaka, the 3 baskets, which teach discipline and discourse and the metaphysical aspects. There's also the Dhammapada, wonderful book regardless of your religious persuasion. These are the collected sayings of the Buddha, tremendous wisdom in that. And there's other texts used by specific schools. Like all the world religions, there's not just one form of it. There's sects and denomination of Buddhism like all the religions. Okay, now here's the big divide, and we saw this in your book, and this is one of the questions we're going to end class with, the difference between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. So we have the geography. It's in different parts of the world. Theravada is the older version, where Mahayana is the more new version. And they believe, the Theravada Buddhists believe, they are the closest to the original teachings of the Buddha. Whereas the Mahayana, they take a lot of that, but they kind of added some things. They put their own twist to it, if you will. I have this visual here to help you with your assignment. I'm not going to go over here in this PowerPoint. Freeze this, and this is the difference between the two in a little more detail, as is this, okay? Now, Buddhism, like I said, started in India, and it spread throughout Asia. Now, by 13th century, it really has disappeared from India. Now, it is in Sri Lanka today in modern times, but it started in northeast India, and you can see it spread through China and into Japan prior to them, most of them subscribing to Shinto, in Thailand and in Laos, Southeast Asia. So it started in India, but it spread through Asia. Now, how does Buddhism differ from Hinduism? And again, Hinduism was around before Buddhism, and I probably could have done Hinduism first, but we'll go over it in a minute. But Buddhism, the big difference is it rejects the Vedic texts, these old Hindu texts, and the caste system and the Hindu deities. Okay, they don't believe in these sorts of things. So they've eliminated the caste system, which I would argue is the biggest difference between the two. Also, this concept of Brahman, they've rejected as well. So I've mentioned these things. Now I better go over what they are. To Hinduism. And again, Hinduism is the oldest of the world religions. Now, 15% of the world is Hindu, and 80% of India's population is Hindu. Now, there's no single founder, and gods and divinities can take many forms, but it's in this one collective spirit called Brahman. And if you ever see this symbol, this is called the Aum, which is the symbol of Hinduism. And again, the Buddhists rejected this caste system, where you have priests at the very top, and you have warriors, merchants, commoners. Then you have the people at the very bottom that dispose of the dead and clean the streets, the untouchables. And within these, you stayed, determined who you married, what job you had. It was essentially 5 different groups within the Hindu way of life. Unlike America, a wealthy person could, lose their money and drop down a few social classes, or marry somebody from a lower social class, and vice versa. This was very, very rigid, and it lasted a long, long time. And it's still there in modern India, but it's lessening as time goes by. I think that's safe to say. Now, in terms of the Hindu religious texts, they had the Rig Veda, the oldest religious text that we have on record in human history, primarily oral tradition, like this teacher will have these children recite it, the same as they have for 1,000 years. The Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and I always struggle with that. So let's go into a little more depth here. Then the Rig Veda comes from Sanskrit, the knowledge of the verses, and it's 1,028 poems grouped into these mandalas, these 10 circles, and they're perfectly preserved from the original, which shows the staying power of Hinduism, which is pretty remarkable. Now, the Upanishads, enormous. So these are the texts composed over a 1,200-year period. You can imagine how many there are, but what's important is this concept of Brahman, the world soul and ultimate reality. So in short, the divine infuses everything. Everything is connected. In fact, Upanishads means connections in Sanskrit. So in short, there's no multiplicity. There's no us and them. Everything is connected. All is one. And it speaks of this individual human soul, or Atman, combining with the Brahman to end any notion of separateness. And if you can unify these two things, you can achieve moksha, or liberation. And this enlightened state, leads to samsara, or rebirth. Okay? And you may have heard of the Bhagavad Gita in history class. When the atomic bomb was dropped at Trinity in July of 1945, the chief scientist, J. Robert Oppenheimer, knowing this is a hugely historical moment, a historical turning point, quoted from the Gita when he said, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," which I think is pretty apropos to say. I think he realized what he unleashed upon the world, okay? So the Gita is a 701 verse scripture which tells an epic story, and it's one of the main holy scriptures. Okay, now to end with Hinduism, these two big concepts, karma. I guess colloquially or in the West we say what goes around comes around, but again, when you put out good energy comes back. And moksha, the salvation at the end of cycles of rebirth. If you have good karma, you get reincarnated into something a little more positive until the cycle is broken, okay? Which brings me to the final assignment today, which is to, right here, class 7 assignment, fairly simple, and hopefully you got something from class today. I want you to create 2 separate Venn diagrams and fill in today what you learned about Hinduism compared to Buddhism, and Theravada Buddhism compared to Mahayana Buddhism. Turn it in and we will call it a day. And hope you learned something today. And I hope that you all are doing